Thanks, Jan. I know I caught you off guard.
He likes to do that.
Since you're a short timer, I get to do that one now, right? I won't have another chance. All right. First, so this is a joint work. This is a work session with Coos Bay Urban Renewal and City Council. And so there are no final decisions to be made. We're just going to go through a discussion period. You're more than welcome to interact with us. This is a lot more relaxed than our council meetings, so feel free to, or just let us know that you want to make a comment on some item. If it's on the agenda, we prefer that you wait till it gets to the agenda, and then, so we'll go from there. So the first item on there is public comment. So this would be a time to discuss something that's not on the agenda, preferably. And so is there any public comment? Okay. Next item, I don't know, council, if, so Jim is going to recognize Jan Curbo. She's retiring. I think tomorrow's your last day? Next week. I'm sorry, I'm jumping the gun. A little ahead of schedule. Anyway, Jim would like to say a few words about your tenure here and how wonderful you've been to this city and how we're going to miss you. And if you give me your cell number and we run into problems, I know I can call you. Right? So anyway.
I have it in case she doesn't want to give it to you.
Okay, thank you, Mayor Benetti. I'd like to take a moment to acknowledge Jan and the things she's done here as she's approaching retirement on December 4th of this year. With this being her last council meeting, I'd like to take some time to congratulate her on her upcoming retirement and wish her the best. I've known Jan for almost 15 years. She has made a lasting impression and provided myself and the rest of our staff with more knowledge on wastewater than we ever knew we could possibly learn. While I won't remember everything she taught us about wastewater, I value the effort she put into teaching us all. And it's easy to say that Jan makes an impression on everyone she meets. One of our consulting engineers, Craig Massey, reached out and would like to add this statement for Jan. I have had the good fortune in my 35 plus years in water and wastewater planning, design, and construction to work with dozens of different owners throughout Oregon and the Pacific Northwest. In that time, I would rate Jan as one of the most passionate, knowledgeable, realistic, patient, conscientious, and creative owners I've had the pleasure to work with. I'm going to miss her involvement on Coos Bay wastewater work in the next few years. I know the city agrees with Mr. Massey's statement. Jan's knowledge and passion will be missed by many. Not only is she passionate about her work, but her philanthropic work as well. I first met Jan, we were both naggers at a high school, trying to push high schoolers to think about and plan for their post-high school plans. She's also a member of the local Seroptimists, where she donates countless hours of volunteering. If you know Jan, you also know she loves to get a good deal. She's a master of couponing, and she shares her coupon knowledge with many on how to be thrifty and make your buck go further. Her couponing skills have helped the Seroptimists expand their fundraisers, and in turn, they give back more to the community. And her skills have saved the city thousands of dollars, and she always looks at all options to present the best quality for the best price. Many people may not know this, but Jan was not always an engineer. She was a social worker for many years, helping many struggling mothers. But then she decided to go back to school and obtain a mechanical engineering degree at OSU. Her husband stayed home in Coos Bay with their children while she attended school during the week. She would come home on weekends and cook for the whole week and help with household chores to be prepared for the following week. Then she would go back up to OSU for the week and continue this pattern until she finished her degree. Once she graduated, she moved to Portland and then eventually back here to Coos Bay. When asked what she will enjoy most in retirement, her comment is, "I'm just going to relax." Jan has definitely earned some relaxing time. She's also looking forward to spending much more time with her grandchildren. At the end, Jan will be missed by all of us, and we hope she enjoys her retirement. and all that it has to offer. Thanks, Jan.
You want to come to the podium and make a 5-minute speech or anything? No? Anyway, on behalf of the council, and they can speak for themselves, but I wanted to tell you, you've been an asset and been just a joy and a pleasure to work with. You've informed myself on many issues and helped me make decisions that have not always been easy, but you've made me informed in this council, and you have definitely saved this city a lot of money and effort and time because of your efforts. And so you will be missed. And I hope to see you at least 1 or 2 council meetings a year. But if you don't, you'll be in our thoughts. Anyone else? Okay, put the pressure on. All right.
Yeah.
Okay, the next item is review the City Council URA Board agenda for the upcoming December 1st, 2020 meeting. These are some of the items. I'm sure that knowing Roger, that he'll add a few, but this is a start. Anyway, first item is discussion of proposal facade improvement grant for 247 South 2nd Street, Seven Devils Brewery. And is Jim handling this?
I've got this one, thank you.
Okay.
The applicant, Councilor Carmen Matthews, requests a facade improvement grant for up to 50%, or I should say for up to $11,841, which is 50% of the cost for his project, which is a bid of $23,682. The requested funds would be used to construct a polycarbonate patio cover on the south side of the Seven Devils Brewery, located again at 247 South 2nd. The patio cover would enhance customer outdoor dining with rain and sun protection and provide pedestrian scale architectural improvements. The applicant seeks an exception to the 3 bid requirement for construction project, or for grant projects. I'm sure it was difficult to get the one that he did get. The applicant seeks this exception, and the design assistant team reviewed the project and recommends approval of the submittal. And the agency budgeted $750,000 of facade improvement grants for this year for the downtown district, and there's adequate funding available for this project. Any questions?
Any questions? And we have Carmen here if you have specific questions to the project.
Obviously, I'm going to step this one out, so.
Of course you will. That's understandable. But I think it's great. It's hard with Carmen. I'm just said he does a great business. He's it's a showcase piece of property downtown with what we're facing with the COVID-19. He's trying to accommodate more in customers, and this is one way to facilitate that. And so I would encourage just not Carmen but others to kind of take suit and keep this in mind. Our facade grants are available, and this is a perfect project for something that will be beneficial to everyone and hopefully his business also.
So I just had a couple questions. I know that Carolyn and I have talked because we sit on the Economic Vitality Committee together, and we have talked about how urban renewal can address some of the COVID things. And I know when I looked over the application, this is fairly permanent thing, and that's also a concern that it's got longevity on a project when we're spending the public's money. But this is something that can be done under, especially in trying to address the needs that businesses have with the restrictions that COVID has placed on them this year.
Yeah, I think it has to be a combination of, it has to meet a capital expenditure, and it has to have some permanency to it, that it meets, I think generally it has to last for more than 5 years. And there are some limitations on what you can use, but this is an acceptable one that fits.
So Nate, following up with Stephanie on this, this is something I think I have a discussion with Roger and Stephanie about, Lucinda and maybe some others. So the thing is, because In the interior, it's making it difficult with the restrictions, and understandable, to have dining or people inside. So if you did a filtration system that, like they have these filters that are like scrubbers, Coos County Health and Wellness has one that they put in, and in fact, they use a UV light to help filtrate the system and kill any bacteria that goes through it. So if something like that was installed or available, that's going to be more on a permanent basis that would upgrade that. Is that going to meet some kind of criteria or not?
The question really would be, is that addressing an issue of blight, which is what urban renewal is supposed to do? And I'd have to research that a little bit, but I'd have some concerns about whether that really is directed towards addressing blight in the area, whereas putting an exterior type of situation to increase the value of the property, I think, would be viewed as doing so.
But if we got CARES Act money,
Pardon?
if we got CARES Act money, could we use those funds to help businesses?
What kind of money?
CARES Act.
CARES Act money, I believe, under the current guidelines, we're supposed to use those to offset our cost. I would say that the urban renewal dollars is worth a look, because there's another component besides blight, and that's encouraging economic development. We might be able to make the stretch for economic development, but I think we would just want to review that with our urban renewal agency consultant.
Yeah, if you could, and even besides the filtration system, if you had barriers like this, if I was still running a restaurant, I'd be looking at something like this in between the tables, where it would help facilitate more dining within that parameters, where some might not be able to meet the 50% because of just their layout. Those types of things, if it might be something that's available. I know that this structure would almost have to be a permanent one,
Yes, it would.
but that's fine. I think that some of the businesses might be willing to do that, if that's the understood, but at least it's something available to them. So if that could be researched, it might be kind of something that could help businesses, especially during this period of time. So.
This is something that actually came up at our last Economic Vitality meeting for the Coos Bay Downtown Association, because we were asked to look at the city's facade program and make some recommendations. And there are some concerns with things that aren't necessarily as permanent, that add to, I think you kind of walk a fine line.
Mm-hmm.
But I think they had a really good discussion, and I think they forwarded their recommendations to the city.
Okay.
And, but again, when I looked at the plan for this, it really is more of a permanent structure. It's not just something that's put up there to, temporarily cover an area. Can you kind of explain what it
Yeah,
is
let
so
me-
the public knows?
Go ahead and take myself off the dais here. Go and address you guys. Carmen Matthews, 289. Oh, wait, yeah, that's right. 289 North 11th Street. There's two numbers in my addresses. So this is intended to be a permanent installation. I had been looking for a way to provide some kind of shelter, outdoor shelter, for years, and the COVID restrictions on restaurants and such really kind of forced that into the forefront of a necessity at this point, with many people not wanting to dine inside and a lot of people preferring to dine outside if at all possible. I think this is a great solution. I went ahead and decided to go with a structure that is much more heavily built, as opposed to just what we have currently right now, which is a temporary tent structure. That's just to get us by until we hopefully get this structure up and running. The polycarbonate top is an extremely durable 10-year warranty substance, multi-walled polycarbonate. It's a standing seam structure, much like a similar style roof would be if it was a metal roof. However, I wanted light to be able to permeate into the building, so that's why we went with that. All the wood is going to be milled locally, and then we have steel posts that set into the concrete along the sidewalk of our south side of our building. So this isn't going anywhere. We have to do quite a bit to set this up for wind ratings and seismic ratings and such. So it's definitely a very permanent structure. It's going to be useful in both summer and winter time. And yeah, if there's any other questions, I'm happy to answer.
I just had a comment. I think that we have struggled, you know, as a counselor and also a downtown association board member with how to help businesses. And this has been a conversation for discussion, you know, how this something, as we've made our way through this process, that this is actually something that we'll be able to see if this moves forward, and is really a way that can address some of the needs that businesses are having in our community.
Yep. I think it will be helpful for us through the rest of the pandemic. I mean, it's a nearly 38-foot long structure, but even with that, it's only about 3 tables worth. So, with the social distancing guidelines, obviously past the pandemic restrictions, we'll be able to snug those tables up a little bit closer and maybe get 4 tables underneath. But you know, having space for people to dine outside really improves, I think, the visibility of our building. It makes it more lively, and architecturally, there's 3 windows on that side where the structure would go, and there's no eyebrow or lid to the windows. So I think it really lends itself to a nice architectural detail for the building as well. So yeah, I hope that other businesses will be looking to this, and you know, we'll be a test subject if it actually helps us out. I think it will, but yeah, I hope other people join in and maybe see if there's ways that they can improve the outside of their building to make it more accessible to those during the pandemic.
Well, outdoor dining is really common in Europe. You and I've had this conversation, so we live in such a beautiful area. The fact that you're going to provide this outdoor seating, I hope that you are the test subject and it's successful for you, and we see other businesses doing the same thing. Carmen, I do have a question. Are you going to have space heaters under that location?
Currently, yes, that is the plan. And actually, part of my bid does not include my electrical bid, which I didn't get in on that application. So I'm going to go ahead and do that anyways. But yeah, I've got infrared heaters that are going to be set up in the eaves, which are really nice because they themselves don't get super hot, and they just heat surfaces instead of the whole ambient area. So we're going to be shooting for that as well.
That's exciting.
Anyone else? Thanks, Carmen.
All right, thank you.
Appreciate it. Okay, next item, let me get there. We're looking at discussion of a lot line adjustment between 710 16th Avenue and the city property. Jim?
Yes, thank you. Mr. Mike Troffler of 710 16th Avenue and East Side approached the city staff about some slope stability issues that gave him concern because he was afraid that the continued failure would adversely affect his deck and home foundation. And there's a map in your report that shows the location of his home and the adjacent property. The slope in question that he's concerned with is part of a steep ravine on the undeveloped city property that is adjacent to his home. This property is approximately 1 acre in size and was dedicated to the city through a planning process. Actually, it was probably the city of East Side as public land, but has never been developed because of the steep ravine. Mr. Troffler would like to stabilize the slope to protect his property, which would require installation of permanent infrastructure on the city's property. He would like then to do a property line adjustment to acquire the necessary city property for installing the infrastructure. He would need approximately 2,000 square feet or 20 by 100 feet, but that's what I thought when I wrote this report. Mr. Troffler stopped by last night and talked to me, and he's here to discuss his desires, but he would like more than that. Because he's gotten a permit to trim vegetation on that slope, and he's discovered that in order to make a cost-effective slope retaining system, he would need to acquire more city property.
Do you know how much more?
Um,
Yes. Please just give your name and,
Mike Crawford.
okay? Just speak in the microphone so we can hear you, please.
My name is Mike Crawford, and thank you very much for giving me this opportunity and time. I've never been in a situation, so I apologize. I moved here from Eugene about 3 years ago. Bought a home, beautiful location, and been working with the city very closely, and they've been really helpful along. I also have a business in town as well, and they've been great with helping me with different power washing and chemical issues and washing and street washing. But I acquired this land. I have books for you with pictures. I have with this COVID thing. I don't know if it would help you understand our situation. I'll wait till everybody has everything.
Thanks, Ryder.
I made 7. I hope that's enough. So the original proposal was, I was working with, and I forget your name?
I'm Jim.
Jim and Randy Dixon, and they've been very helpful. Randy originally proposed an eco-block system. It would require no engineering, and I could run it down the length of my property, and it wouldn't require any, engineering for heel stabilization. I could cut in a spot, put in these blocks, and hopefully solve the problem. The only problem with this situation is it ends up costing almost $100,000, and that doesn't even include the installation. That's just the materials, way out of my price range. So then I started, I got some local engineer, Ben Heavenstad, I believe is in the back. It's on this proposal sheet. They came out and looked at it, and they aren't even able to give me a bid until they actually get the brush taken out, which is what I started doing. I got a permit for it and discovered a huge hole. So this is what got the project started, was this, okay? So as I started looking into it, I started clearing brush, and I discovered that. And this right here is me 30 feet into the brush. That's 10 feet more than 20. And the hill's still sloping downward. So, as I've been attempting to pull out all this brush, which I have no problem doing, it's just work is all it is. To discover it, I started finding more and more spots in the hill that are bad. There's areas along the side of my house where the hill is actually starting to move. So I don't know how serious the situation is until I pull out all of the landscaping that's there. And I'm looking to take out brush and blackberries, but not trees, because trees would be helping stabilize the hillside as well. And I'm not going to touch any of the hill until the spring comes. So I'm working basically on all the flat area outside. I talked with the neighbor next door. He's Dr. Martin, Jim Martin, lives next door to me, and he's willing to do a land swap with me on a portion of my land and a portion of his land, which would open up about 40 feet for me to access my land to bring in heavy equipment. And I may end up having to bring in thousands of dollars worth of dirt, because the dirt that's on the hill has no nutrients in it, has no stickiness to it to help hold the land in place. And then I'm gonna have to landscape everything. It may require engineering to do all this, so I'm a little overwhelmed. And like I said, I did start a business in town. I'm trying to hire employees. I've been working them through the temporary agency. I'm working through a South Coast in town because my business has just exploded in town, but I can't keep up with all the work.
Great.
So it's helping me develop, but I would like to be able to focus my money and my attention on growing that as well. So like I said, I have more plans to show you things. This gives you an idea of the amount of slope loss on that one spot, just by looking at it. You're welcome to look through these. This is my business right here, so you know I'm in part of the community. Is there any questions I might be able to answer for anyone?
Council, some questions? So, I guess my question is, how many feet are you looking for? Before it was 20 by 100, obviously. Is it 40? Is that what I'm seeing?
Well, this is the scary part. And again, I'm asking and not expecting, but hoping. There's a map on the back that I drew in some lines. On the east side of the property, I'm hoping for 60 feet in order. If you look at that paper that I'm standing in, I'm at 30 feet and I'm not even down the hill yet. So that gives you an idea how long the slope is. And I have to be able to get heavy equipment in there, you know, whatever Benny Hemstad's going to use. I'm going to have to be able to pull dirt back and forth through there. They're going to have to stack it. I have no idea how much room I'm going to need. Now, the whole thing with doing all this, you can see the 40 feet that the landowner's going to switch with me, and I'm going to switch with the road with him on the side.
Which
And
one is
then
that?
That would give me the access to my property.
Is that this
Which
map
one is
right
that?
here? Is that the one you're talking
Yes,
about?
yes.
Could you point out to us on your map exactly where, so the 40 feet,
Okay, so the
that's your
40 feet,
swap?
that's the land he's going to give me, and I'm going to give him this.
Okay,
And because my land is actually up on his driveway right now,
okay.
which will open up this area. And right here, there's some natural springs. So I can't drive any equipment on this part. And you want to keep it accessible, keep it natural for, you know, I'm sure animals use it to drink and whatever. There's a lot of deer up there. But I want to maybe build up dirt and hillside on this area instead of rock, because it would be less expensive, and create a gradual slope, and then put some kind of landscaping to hold the hill in place.
Okay.
But again, it's all got to maybe be engineered by Benny Hemstad, and I have no idea what it's going to cost.
Sure, I understand. So a small project's turning into a larger project.
An awful one.
So I guess I'm going to ask staff, do we have any use for this property in any fashion?
We don't. It's not under the city's actual ownership because it was platted as a park, but it's not usable as a park. At this point in time, we're not sure what else it could be used for, but we don't believe, there's no opposition on staff. Whether or not he needs more, I think if there's, unless there's some concerns by the council, I think you could leave this for staff to work out with the owner and figure out the right width of property we're willing to give up. I mean, the compensation he's willing to give us is really, it's equal probably to the value to us. So this will help him, it'll stabilize that slope. I think it's beneficial to go ahead and do it.
I mean, I agree. I think it's, we're helping an owner to do some development, which is going to improve the property and some city asset. So I think it's great. How about the rest of this council?
I agree. Retaining his asset, being his home, and making sure that that asset is secure, I think is obviously beneficial, mutually beneficial for all of us. It does look like you're going to have quite an engineering job here,
Thank you.
but I don't think it's insurmountable. You know,
And so, the property has been surveyed by Dodge Surveying locally, so
Okay.
everything's,
So I have a question. This was gifted to the city. Was there any encumbering language or anything like that?
We don't know if it was gifted to the city. We're not exactly sure how we got it. We just know when it was platted. It was platted to and we believe the city of Eastside because it was.
1977.
So there is no deed or deed restrictions.
Okay. I couldn't think of what the word was, but deed restrictions, yeah, that.
Yeah,
that's
so,
what I'm
and
looking for.
under, I guess, the authority of the charter, if there's no opposition, I have the authority to manage the land, the properties of the city.
You all right with this?
What?
How do you feel about it? You all right?
Yeah, I'm great.
Phil?
I just have a quick question. This particular exhibit here where you've got some writing on it,
okay.
are you proposing a 40-foot and a 60-foot?
The 40-foot is not so as important. I do have a little bit, like maybe 10 feet, and then the hill drops off, so some of that property is still mine. So the 40-foot could be less, maybe 20-foot.
Up
But
here,
this-
up here?
Yeah, but the 60 is probably pretty close to what I need.
So does that 60 take you to the bottom?
It's close, it's still not all the way to the bottom.
Okay.
Oh, really? Wow.
And what I think has happened as the hillside has slid and give away, is it's run down the hill more. So as I pull out the base and they move the dirt around, I'm hoping that we can reclaim some of that soil. But like I said, there's a natural spring in a creek, and I don't want to destroy that creek. I would like to leave it natural, where it's part of the habitat. But I'm hoping some of that hillside is from my hill.
Have you
Do we
made it
have
all the way to
we-
the bottom
we
yet?
have to.
Pardon me?
It's
Have you made it all the way down to the
I
bottom? yet?
haven't yet. I actually have a gentleman in town that I got he's helped me with the slope stabilization with the plastic. He's had some great ideas. He's given me a lot of advice. And I'm actually going to hire him to help me pull that. We're going to clean all that out. I have thought about purchasing a tractor on a payment program with a device that I can use to go and take out some of that brush. But again, I have to get a home loan to get the tractor, buy the equipment that goes with it to do it. Because I'd like to be able to do some of it myself, if I can. But,
So will the,
bigger stuff I won't be able to.
will the equipment be crossing our property or is it private property?
If we are able to work out a deal to give him property or to sell him a portion of his property to be on his, I do need to probably state that there's going to have to be some permits that are going to be involved. And anytime you're moving dirt and changing slopes and you're dealing with streams, there is always environmental.
So because it's a fish-bearing stream, would we have to have a riparian zone? Is that,
I
know
don't
that
think it's a
fish-bearing,
fish-bearing stream.
okay,
but anytime that you have water moving in the state,
got it,
there are always issues to deal with the Division of State Lands.
okay.
And I'm probably going to miss a few agencies. But staff can at least give guidance on which ones that need to be consulted.
So if I'm hearing, Phil, you have any more questions?
Well, I guess my other question would be to Roger and to Jim. What's the advantage for the city to hang on to this acre?
Well, your other option, and Nate's looked into this, because this is actually abnormal, the way that we have it, or the way that it was platted. Our other option is, we really can't just go out and sell it as a parcel. You could vacate it, but you would need all of the adjoining property owners to come in. And I would imagine there's going to be some cost incurred to do surveying, and you'd want those people to join in and pay those costs, because the city won't get any funds for it, so those costs should be borne by the property owners. Now, some property owners may not want that because really it's not usable land.
So, if I may, The owner next to me, Jim, he has an interest in some of the property. He's building on part of the land that he's switching with me, and I know he'd be interested in some of that land, and he'd be willing to incur some of the surveying fees with me, and I'm willing to incur my survey fees. And if it would help the city, I'd be happy to talk with the owners of the other lands, and I'd even be willing to pay for their survey fees if it helps solve any problem like that.
Well, personally, I'm not sure the rest of you feel, I would rather just see us do a lot line adjustment instead of a vacation. That's my opinion. I mean, I think there's going to be costs and other ones to deal with, and in this case, Daryl's willing to come in and take care of this and do a lot line adjustment and work it out with his neighbor, and it's pretty clean for us. We just have to work it out with the staff to come up with a recommendation. That's my feeling.
I'm totally fine with letting Roger handle it.
Yep.
Yeah.
Me too.
You know, that, whatever staff feels like is most advantageous to the city, I'm okay with that. Because this is a piece that, as you said, will, you know, if it hasn't been developed in the last 50 years, it probably won't in the next either. And it really doesn't have much potential to serve the city. And if we're doing lot line adjustments, we're actually putting portions of it back on the tax roll. So I don't have any problem with that at all.
Correct. If we were due to a vacation, though that will have to come back to the council. There's a prescribed process by the state that has to be followed.
But you could do lot line adjustments to more than one. I mean, if other adjoining landowners were interested and they wanted to all get together and share costs. You can't eliminate the lot though.
Yeah,
Right.
You just can't eliminate it.
But you could get it down to 5,000 square feet, which is the minimum for the zoning. And we don't look at postage stamp. I'm just saying, I don't have a problem with letting the city manager and city staff do whatever they think is best for the city.
I agree.
I
I'm good.
concur.
I'm good with that.
Me too.
I think we have direction.
Good. Mike, thank you so much for coming.
Thank you for
Appreciate
your
it.
time. I hope I answered all your questions.
did.
And
Thank you for the
good luck,
maps.
and
They
good
were
luck
great.
on this.
Oh,
I'm
you're
glad
wel-
you're willing to take it on.
I know an electronics would have been.
No, they were
nightmare.
great. The maps were
Yeah,
wonderful.
no, thank you for this. This is very helpful.
Thank
You've
you
got
for
a-
your time.
You've got a large challenge ahead of you.
Yes, I know. But, you know, I'm enjoying, I moved in the city about 3 years ago, and it's turned into a home for me. You know,
Great.
so
Well, welcome.
I'm participating in the city, and I'm a respiratory therapist 3 nights of the week, so,
Welcome. We're glad to
Yeah,
have you.
glad to have you.
Yeah,
here.
thank you.
bet.
all right?
Thanks,
Thank
Mike.
you so much.
Thanks for coming out tonight.
Thanks for coming out.
Okay, number C is discussion transition plan for the city managed operations and maintenance of the collection system. This is, we had talked about prior in another meeting. I don't know how much we've talked about this. Anyway, it's been discussed. So Jim, Jennifer, who's handling it?
Yeah, I'll
Let's talk
take
about it.
this. Just as a reminder, this, at the October 27th meeting, work session, we did discuss this with council. And we have contracted with Mr. Mark Walter of Water Dude to put together some more skin to and meat to the bones on what we discussed with you the other day regarding the transition of operations and maintenance of the collection system, which would be the piping system for both the waste sewer or I should say waste and storm sewers. The budget impacts for us to take over operations and maintenance of the collection system would primarily come into effect in FYE '22, so not until next July. Staff will work with Donovan Enterprises, our rate consultant, regarding budget impacts, if any, and it is anticipated this will not increase our forecasted 6.5% increase in wastewater rates, but may have the potential to decrease our improvement projects. And if you do go forward with this and we employ Mr. Walters to assist us, his proposed cost for this service of preparing a transition plan for us is just under $95,000. But Mr. Walter is available to give a short presentation, and he has a PowerPoint slide presentation to give to you.
Okay.
All right, can everybody hear me?
Hello?
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes,
Yes.
we can hear you.
All right. Well, I've got 2 screens and a laptop up, so I can hopefully I can keep track of everything here. Good evening, and thank you for your collective service to the city. I know things are pretty wild right now. I'm Mark Walter with Water Dude Solutions. Water Dude Solutions has been involved with several of the city's wastewater projects over the past 4 years, and I'm very familiar with the system. In this past January, we met when we could meet in person, and we talked over some of the wastewater O&M options related to the entire wastewater system. And tonight I'm just going to focus on providing information on the most recent work that looked at specifically at the city-operated wastewater collection and stormwater systems. I'll also include an overview of the timeline and associated transition. So the most recent staffing study update focused on the O&M of the wastewater collection system and stormwater system. The scope of work for this project was derived from the existing contract for these services. The staffing plan is designed to meet or exceed those service levels. And some of the elements that support the scope of work are the cleaning and inspection goal of a 5-year cycle, system supervisor and lead operator, and environmental specialist position. The 5 positions on the left of the org chart would be additions to the city staff, and the wastewater engineer and environmental specialists are currently included in the city staffing plan. So in addition to the staffing plan, the operating budget was also updated. Personnel costs represent the top scale using similar city positions. Personnel costs were updated with 2021 compensation and benefit values. So these are as current as we can get it at this point. The materials and services were estimated based on typical experience in the expenses in these areas and included comparison with other Oregon systems. So I pulled up from the internet various budgets from other cities that were broken down to make sure that this budget was comparable. So next I'll provide an overview of the activities involved with the transition. These tasks are typical programs that would be developed around best practices in each area. And in developing this list, I referred to contract operation transitions, and in this case, we're just reversing the process. There are 4 main elements in this transition, and I'll just kind of go over each one. I gotta remember what screen I'm looking at. The transition plan. All the transition plan elements will be fully defined and confirmed with city staff. And then once we get the elements confirmed, we'll conduct a workshop that confirms roles, task assignments, and then we'll develop an implementation schedule. So that's a very, very crucial first step. From there, we'll begin the task 2 staffing piece, where we'll confirm the organizational structure, develop job descriptions, begin staff recruitment, begin onboarding and training of those staffs, and then also include some contingency planning. So as an example, if for some reason you weren't able to maybe get a couple of collection people on board at the right time, you could have a contingency to outsource cleaning inspection. Several cities along the coast contract out their sewer collection and cleaning activities. From there, a concurrent process, I guess a concurrent activity will be this plan development piece. And again, these are items that support the management, operation, and maintenance of the system. So we'll look at what kind of software to use to keep track of data, to do planning, and those kinds of things. We'll develop an operations and maintenance plan. And this plan here is more about, because you'll see on task 4C below there's another plan. But this plan here is really specific to staffing and kind of the operation of the work group. The next one is customer service plan. It just calls out how you respond to a customer service request, emergency response plan, safety plan, and then a performance measurement plan to track how well you're meeting your goals. So those tasks 2 and 3 will kind of go side by side. And then as we get closer to the transition, we'll have transfers of roles and responsibilities from the contractor to the city. We'll probably we'll need to get a little deeper into how to affect asset management and manage those assets. And then the operations and maintenance plan at this level really combines a lot of the plans that have already been developed, but puts it into a full plan along with some other small pieces. I think an example would be how you respond to a sanitary sewer overflow. That plan is very specific to how DEQ wants you to respond to that. And next is this timeline. I guess I'm assuming at this point that you all have seen the draft plan that covered all those items that was issued a few weeks ago. But anyway, we'll go into transition support here. So given kind of that list of activities, I think it's real important to kind of put it out here on a calendar. This timeline shows the initiation of the transition planning starting on January 1 with the city operation beginning July 2021. So about a 6-month period. And then listed here are several critical milestones. And one that pops out here pretty quick is to begin the supervisor recruitment. The idea being that if you can get the supervisor on board a little early, it'll reduce your stress, but also give you another resource to help with this transition planning. But again, and then staff recruitment would come in halfway through here, and then it just kind of shows a period of time of about 2 weeks to kind of get staff on board and kind of go through the final transition pieces. And with that, I'll answer questions, discuss next steps.
Council questions?
I guess I'm concerned about when we're onboarding staff. I feel like it's a short window, 2 weeks. I mean, I realize we would consider onboarding a supervisor in April, but onboarding new staff in June to June 14th to take over July 1st makes me nervous.
Well, I'm assuming that should the city decide to take some of this over, that we will probably be hiring some of Jacob's staff. We'll obviously open it up to them, and so there may be some transition. We, of course, wouldn't take them automatically. We would want to go through a process to make sure that it's the right fit for the city and the right skill set for the job. And that's generally how we do all our work. It might need a little bit more time than that. I wouldn't disagree with you.
Okay, I just would like that to be considered, that we could extend that onboarding time so it's as seamless as it can be a transition.
Absolutely. Yeah, and that's a great observation, and I think a key point of having this initial transition planning meeting to where, we can all discuss, those exact kind of things and get the timelines really dialed in.
Other questions, counselors?
The part of the contract that we pay Jacobs right now to maintain this collection system, is that a separate contract? Or do we renegotiate our contract with them for operating the plants?
So if we were looking at making this transition, we would make this transition in for the next budget year, and we would negotiate that amendment to the contract,
Okay,
just as we're going to be discussing this year's amendment here in a little bit.
okay.
So that was one of the questions I had. So we're onboarding in 2021, which is still part of this fiscal year, which was not budgeted.
Correct.
But the operation would take over in 2021, 22, should we move forward with this. And that would be budgeted. So how do we deal with that 7 months, really?
No, that's an excellent question, and so what we would probably do is we decrease our capital expenditure budget, so unplanned projects, we would probably not take on as many projects. We'd probably have to do a less project or two in order to save that money. There would be some, additional cost to us, so we would be paying double towards the end of the year for staffing, but I don't know that there's actually a good time, and there's always going to be crossover.
So if the current contract with Jacobs is one big thing, collections and treatment, is there any way to do a comparison in what the collections part costs us now?
That's really a question for Jacobs. We get a percentage. They allocate a percentage that they spend for plant 2, plant 1, stormwater and sewer. But I don't know the backup for that percentage.
I can't imagine they would be forthcoming with that number, would they? Oh, you got it?
Well, I don't know if they're forthcoming or not, but it hasn't been suitable. I mean, they're not handling it correctly anyway, so it's kind of like a moot point as far as I'm concerned. I mean, we're in a position that we need to do something, and this is our first step because we've been, I think, forced to do this because it's not been handled right. I'm just going to be blunt about it. I'm not sure if they're on yet or not, but that's the case. And so,
I think
you know,
it's
this was our
legitimate,
first step
but I
that
think
we
it's
were
also
hoping.
a legitimate question, and I don't know why I keep coming back to try and find that answer. For me,
which-
that's an important
Yeah.
Which is?
piece, the financial piece. Again, I agree, we have issues, and we've been looking at this, and staff's been dealing with it for a long time, but for some reason, I just keep coming back to wanting to know that number.
Well, I mean, I guess, you know, we'd have to bring out the budget to how many employees it takes and operational stuff. I mean, we might be able to get there, but I guess my point is how it's being operated. I mean, even if we got a number X, whatever that number is, obviously it's not enough because they're asking for an increase already. And so you have to put that into play that they're asking for, and we don't even know if that number is going to take care of the increase that we need. So I guess, Mr. Walter, are we increasing the staffing over what Jacobs has?
Depending on how you look at it. So the environmental specialist is a new position, but that position's already been taken on by the city. So I wouldn't count that. And quite frankly, I would say it's close. I think in the last 2 years, the organization chart for the contractors changed about 3 times at least. But typically, you'd see 2 or 3 plus a supervisor.
So if you look at here, it says action request, it says the cost for these services is $94,840. That's more than what we're paying now. I'm presuming that.
What that number is, that's to have Mr. Walter do the transition plan for us.
Okay. So that's not.
So,
okay.
right, he has, Mark, if you would, you could put on your spreadsheet, show the spreadsheet for the costs. There we go.
So are you saying that currently some of these positions the city has taken on already, which is why there's no number in the salary and benefits? Okay. So these are just costs for probably additional staff that we would have to budget for and materials.
Those numbers do not include the wastewater engineer and the environmental specialist. We've already budgeted for those.
And the other thing, I mean, can you even, Jennifer, can you tell us how much staff time is being put in now by us on this? I mean, do we even have a dollar amount that we can put in, that what our own staff is putting in on this?
The majority of Jan's time and,
I mean, so it's hard to even put a number on it. I mean, basically, I guess it's fiscally impacting our staff from doing other things and costing us. You know, I mean, I'm frustrated to the point that, I mean, I didn't want to have to take this step, but I don't think we have an option. And then once we get a handle of it, I think that we'll make a determination of actually what the cost is. I don't know.
So if it's taking time of staff, what does this do? How does that change that, I guess? How is that going to change what staff is doing now versus what happens if we take the wastewater system on, this collection?
hiring someone that's dedicated to overseeing the collections crew, and it will take on that responsibility. And there's also kind of, the dollar amount is hard to put there's also part of the dollar amount on the fact that we're going to be managing ourselves and more of a vested interest. That's hard to put a dollar on.
You know, another thing that when we talked with Mark back in January, Mr. Walter, we were talking about hiring a supervisor on top of paying Jacobs. Now, the way I understand it, we're looking at hiring a supervisor if we don't do this and taking the collection system on and a 30% increase. I mean, it just seems like a pit that we're getting into here. And we're not getting satisfactory. I mean, we see violations constantly. I see Stephanie frustrated by emails and questioning the staff on a regular basis. You know,
They're
so-
good questions.
Rightfully so.
Yes, absolutely. So I guess, I mean, I know that, I don't know how we're going to come to a number before we make a decision. I don't think we have an option here. This was kind of the first step with Jacobs to hopefully that we can move forward and get things resolved and back on track is what the intent was on this, I believe.
So I'm not sure how to phrase this question. I've thought about this all day. But sometimes when somebody does a contract for services and they're overlooking, there's an umbrella over a large thing. So we've got wastewater collections, stormwater, and then what's the other piece of it?
Plan one, plan two.
Yes, okay. So they're overseeing that large function. And now we take a piece of that away. It could potentially make that other piece not worth having staff under a contract to do here. So if that's the case, are we ready to take on the whole system? Because that could potentially be where we're headed. I know you guys have had to have this conversation.
I've had this same question all day as well, and I think what she's trying to say is it going to put Jacobs 1 foot out the door?
That's really a question for Jacobs, and we are on the line. But we have Mark Walters, he's been in this business, we talked extensively. If you're going to make a decision, now's the time to make it so we can plan here for the next few months to do that transition. Jacobs has also mentioned that they are willing to work with us if that is our decision.
So, do we have a plan B then? I mean, do we have a plan B?
Me to take it all over?
So let's say that this is the first step, and this is what we wanted to do because we've seen other cities do the same thing, right? And we know that Jacobs does have some skill, but their wastewater collection and stormwater, that they're not as good with that. And we've seen that personally, firsthand. So the question is, if we take this and then they say that they're not interested in working with us, have we worked with Mark to make sure we've got a plan B prepared?
A year ago we did, yes.
Okay.
Just to refresh your memory, we prepared a transition plan for the entire system.
Oh,
So, and whether by happenstance or by plan, you're going to be discussing here in a little bit the current amendment for this current year. And I've shared with you that it's not good news. We're not pleased with the proposals from Jacobs on cost increases. We were looking for improvements in operations, and there have been some that it's called out in your report, but we're not pleased that while we're looking for those improvements, we're also going to see a huge cost increase. So you may be at the same question at the end of the night. Do we need to push forward and look for a transition plan? Is there another option? And I will reiterate that Mr. Rodriguez has been very plain and cordial in saying that if the city wants to entertain a transition plan, that they would work with us to facilitate such a transition plan.
So is your assessment then that they really do want to move on from the city of Coos Bay?
That has not been said to us. I think what's been said to us is to back up the reason for the large increases is that they're losing money on Coos Bay.
But, Stephanie, you can ask them that in a few minutes, and they're online, so I'm sure they're hearing all this, and I'm sure that they can come up with an answer for us. And I think that's an answer we need to ask them.
And I will, definitely. And I think a good piece to this is that, something good about this is if they are, at least they have said, we're not going to leave you high and dry. We're not out of it. So.
That is, and I've talked about this scenario with staff, and staff has assured me that in our work with Mark, that the scope of this transition plan could be increased and broadened so that we had a transition plan for the entire, both the operations and the maintenance of the asset.
So something to ponder until we get to that question is, if they're losing money with a contract for Coos Bay, how are we going to do this so that we don't, end up having to move stuff from other things that we're doing and lose money on it as well?
Go ahead, Jennifer.
Based on the work that Mark Walters did a year ago, basically the cost that they're proposing today is what the cost that Mark Walters said is going to take us to run it and manage it in-house. So it's the same.
Yeah, I think we need to keep in mind what was proposed in January. I think there were some different scenarios that Mark had given us, and I think that we just need to kind of remember those. And so that's where we're at. But we also had the same discussion that same night with Mr. Walter making a proposal, and then we had Jacobs also come up and said that, that they could take care of this and rectify it and get back to us. And this has been going on, I thought it was in March, but it's been since January. So we're looking at a year, and we're not any better off. So it's a discussion we need to have with Jacobs and make a decision on how they feel and what we feel. And so we'll have that discussion in 2 items. So anyway, if nothing else, I still believe that what faces us is that we need to take the collection systems on no matter what. And I think that's what we had discussed prior. And I think that's something that we need to do as a step, no matter how we move on anything else. Do you agree with that, Jennifer? Okay. Jim?
Yes, I agree.
All right. Council? I know it's not palatable, but it's something that we need to move forward and try to get a handle on, unfortunately. So.
Jennifer, last time you were here, you talked about a test you were doing on the intake. I'm not sure, I'm probably not using the right terminology.
The influence study.
Yeah.
Yes. So we still have a few more days left in the influence study, but we got a briefing last week, and based on the information we're being given by Jacobs, there doesn't appear anything impacting our influence. There's no inhibitory substance. But I haven't got the final report or the final results from Jacobs yet, so to be continued.
Any more questions?
I'd like to thank Mark for the presentation.
Yeah, Mark,
So-
thank you. And I'm sure that, I'm not sure,
Thank
I know
you.
that we'll be talking to you again. So, but I do appreciate it. And so thank you for the information for us.
Thank you very much.
Okay, the next item, council, is presentation on fog. This is something that I know has been brought up in the past and we've talked about. And Jim and Jennifer get to talk about it, so.
Sure, I'll introduce this item. City Council directed staff to develop a fats, oil, and grease or fog reduction program. The city contracted with Susanna Littell of Littell Consulting Group. Hopefully I said your name correctly, Susanna.
Good job, thank you.
Okay, Ms. Littell will present the work done to date, and the presentation will highlight the review of the Oregon Building Codes Division current fog reduction program implementations and 3 fog reduction program implementation strategies that the City Council can implement. The 3 strategies follow the good, better, and best options for the implementation to be in stages should council choose to do so. And what we're requesting the council to do after this is ask questions and provide staff with direction on what type of fog reduction program you'd like us to further develop. With that, Susanna's on board.
Well, welcome and thank you for inviting me to tonight's meeting. Are you able to see the presentation fine?
Yes, we are.
Great, welcome. So that was a wonderful intro, so thank you so much. And we'll go ahead and move forward with tonight's fog program policy development and implementation strategies for Coos Bay Council consideration. So tonight I'd like to present the purpose of the fog program, the sources of fog discharges to the city sanitary sewer, a review of fog program policy implementation strategies and the individual strategy elements, the recent city success stories using implementation strategy 2 approach that the city has experienced, and fog program policy development project next steps. We also do have, time permitting, and if you're interested, a review of the Oregon Plumbing Code policy accommodations and what they've accommodated for other programs in Oregon for your consideration if you're so interested. So the purpose of the fog program, well, namely, it's to control and reduce fats, oils, and grease, namely fog, discharges to the sanitary sewer system. To control non-residential fog sources by establishing equitably and implementing a combination of effective fog control measures and education outreach policies, and then working with these customers to address identified compliance issues. And then also to control residential fog sources through public education outreach efforts, including utility mailers and letter information mailers, your Friday updates, school presentations, Earth Day events, TV PSAs, newspaper outreach, and other public TV interviews you might be able to get involved in. And then most notably your community events and festivals. You have a lot of beautiful festivals in Coos Bay that you can provide education outreach materials to, including your farmers market, your Blackberry Arts Festival, May 5 Festival, and then your Bay Area Fun Festival. So this is what your current residential fog outreach program education brochure looks like. This is your front and back. And I've reviewed it. It's a wonderful brochure. It provides a lot of great information for your residential customers. Again, residential fog will be addressed through education outreach. So what are the sources of fog discharge to the city sanitary sewer? There's 3 major sources. They would be from your food service establishments, or FSEs, that discharge fog-laden wastewater. And this would be from your restaurants and supermarkets, hotel kitchens, coffee shops, ice cream and smoothie shops, hospital and school cafeterias, commercial food operations, and food truck commissaries. Believe it or not, even your food trucks will have the need to discharge fog-laden wastewater at the end of the day. So FSC activities and situations that cause fog pass-through would include insufficient cleaning of the FSC's fog pretreatment device, and that would be the grease traps and grease interceptors that your FSCs have. undersized or improperly installed or even missing fog pretreatment devices, sinks and drains that may be discharging fog but are not connected to a fog pretreatment device, waste fryer oil improperly discharged to sinks and drains because that liquid oil can pass through the fog pretreatment device. And then you have hot water, soaps, enzymes that are used to emulsify grease in drains, and then also can emulsify the fog inside the fog pretreatment device. Secondly, you have your waste haulers that improperly clean or improperly dispose wastewater removed from FSC fog pretreatment devices. And what we're talking about here are waste haulers that are discharging the waste directly to the sewer system, and they're not properly disposing of the wastewater, and that can happen. And then lastly, residential customers from their typical cooking-related dishwashing practices. But like what we discussed earlier, we're going to control that through fog education outreach directly with them. So let's review the fog program strategies that we've worked on to present to you tonight. Basically, it's a review of 3 strategies: the good, the better, and the best strategies. So the 3 strategies include strategy 1, which implements a fog program with a focus on elements 1 and 2, with 1 being requiring FSCs to implement fog program kitchen best management practices, or BMPs, and then maintain documentation on site related to staff education and outreach training that they provided. And then element 2, which includes establishing and requiring proper waste management and documentation practices by the FSC and their waste haulers. So they would be maintaining those receipts and manifests at their facility. Then you have strategy 2, which implements the fog program with the focus on all the elements in strategy 1, that's elements 1 and 2, plus elements 3 and 4, which include element 3, that's where we'll be establishing and requiring FSCs waste management documentation to be shared with the city for tracking. So not only are the FSCs maintaining the documentation, but they're sending that to the city for tracking purposes. And then element 4, establishing and requiring FSCs to comply with effective fog source control measures. And that would be things like requiring FSCs to properly clean and maintain and inspect their pretreatment devices, and similar measures. And then lastly, we have strategy 3, which implements the fog program with a focus on all the elements within strategy 1 and 2. That's elements 1, 2, 3, and 4, plus elements 5 and 6, which include providing city enforcement tools to address noncompliance, and then providing the city with the ability to assess program cost recovery measures. So let's review the individual elements, the individual 6 elements, starting with element 1, establishing and requiring FSCs to implement fog kitchen best management practices and maintain documentation relating to their educating staff of these policies. So what we're going to do is review the policy pros and cons, and the pros would be that this is a very common low-cost approach and it requires minimal city inspection time. It can actually help FSCs reduce fog discharges to their pretreatment devices and to unprotected drains. It can also reduce FSC fog pass-through to the city, supporting fog program effectiveness. It can reduce FSC costs relating to device cleaning and to address interior sewer line backup, so it actually does help the FSC. And it does reduce waste discharges to the stormwater system related to improper waste grease and fryer oil containment and disposal practices. So this also helps the FSC. The policy cons include may not eliminate or significantly reduce fog pass-through to the city, may not address fog pretreatment device operation issues, and it may not adequately address fog pretreatment device waste accountability issues. But we do consider element 1 policy is a good basic fog program implementation strategy, and it can be adopted by the city either by BMP, code, or city resolution. Element 2, which includes establishing and requiring proper waste management documentation practices to be maintained by the FSC and their waste haulers. Again, this is being maintained at their location and not being necessarily shared with the city unless the city actually goes on site to review. So the pros include providing documentation for fog pretreatment device waste are properly disposed of. So we have some documentation. It can reduce fog pass-through to the city when FSCs do comply with the policy, and it can reduce waste discharges to the storm system associated with improper waste disposal practices. But the cons are, it's difficult for the city to verify the FSC is compliant with the policy since the documentation is being maintained at the FSC or the servicing waste hauler location. So you actually have to go on site to verify. And it may not be effective policy unless frequent FSC inspections are performed by the city. But all in all, it is a good policy. It's considered a good fog program implementation strategy, and it can be adopted by BMP, code, or by city resolution. Element 3, this is what we call a better, part of the better strategies. And it includes establishing and requiring the FSC waste management documentation to be shared and sent to the city for tracking. The pros of the policy include considering, this is considered to be a gold standard policy for effective fog programs. And this is something you see being implemented nationwide. It provides the best verification that the fog pretreatment device wastes are being properly disposed of. The city has documentation and it can review the excessive pretreatment device waste levels on the documentation, waste pass-through observations noted by the waste hauler, and can evaluate the need for increasing the cleaning frequency for the pretreatment device. So the information you get from review of these documents that are sent to the city or made available to the city are very valuable to you. And it can significantly reduce fog pass-through to the city sanitary sewer. The cons are it results in slightly higher fog program costs to administer the policy, and this is associated with the city's time to review manifests and track the manifests, and to identify non-compliance issues on the manifest forms. And it does not always address pretreatment device operational issues. So you won't always see problems with the pretreatment device. The only way you can address that is by going on site. But Element 3 policy is considered a better fog program implementation strategy, especially when combined with policy elements 1 and 2. And this policy can be adopted by BMP, code, or resolution amendment. Element 4, establish and require FSCs to comply with effective fog source control measures. Again, these measures can include requiring customers to properly inspect, clean, and maintain their pretreatment devices, and to address any noncompliance. So the pros would include, this is considered to be a gold standard policy for effective fog programs. Nationwide, many utilities have implemented these types of measures, and they're easy to implement. They can significantly reduce fog pass-through from FSCs to the city because you're controlling the fog source. It provides defined source control measures to reduce and prevent FSC fog discharges, and proper pretreatment device maintenance can actually benefit the FSC by extending the pretreatment asset life for the device, improve device operability, and can reduce sewer line backups into the business and those related cleanup costs they would incur. So that does help the FSC. The cons would include higher fog program costs to administer the program for routine city inspections of the FSC, tracking the manifests, and to address any noncompliance they identify. And then effective source control measures may result in higher costs to the FSC associated with proper pretreatment device cleaning. So what I have found over the last 25 years is that most FSCs welcome these changes because they do identify that proper maintenance, even though there is some cost associated with it, the asset longevity that they observe by properly maintaining the device really does benefit them. So it's a really good policy. It's considered a best fog program implementation strategy combined, especially when combined with elements 1 through 3. It can be adopted by code, BMP, or city resolution. All right, this is part of the best implementation strategies 5 and 6. So element 5 is establish and authorize city enforcement responses to address fog program noncompliance. Now, these activities, the pros include, it can support fog program effectiveness. They can support FSC achieving compliance quicker. It can actually support city staff working with the FSCs directly within policy limitations to establish reasonable compliance timeframes. So you work together as a team with the FSC. And the activities can often resolve FSC noncompliance with no penalty assessment or formal violation notices issued. So you can issue informal notices, violation notices, warning notices, and compliance requests, and effectively address noncompliance through those types of mechanisms. And then the activities can accommodate an appeal process to the FSC to mitigate their concerns. So we do have a mechanism in there to help address their needs. The cons, though, is that the FSC appeals to city enforcement responses may actually increase the city time requirements related to their evaluation of appeals and to issue appeal findings to the FSCs. But I also find that to be very minimal because you're working very closely with the customer to come up with reasonable timeframes, and that's usually mitigated. So Element 5 policy is considered a best FOG program implementation strategy, especially when combined with Elements 1 through 4. But Element 5 policy can only be adopted by code. So I want to make that known. And then lastly, Element 6, establish and authorize FOG program fees and other cost recovery measures. So the pros of this policy would include, it's a common approach to support implementing effective FOG program. And again, you can implement these FOG program fees over a period of time. You can implement it in a phased approach. It supports partial or full FOG program cost recovery by the city. It allows the city to directly apply FOG program costs to the FSCs that require this service and relieving this burden on residential wastewater users. It supports applying other cost recovery approaches, including assessing high-strength wastewater charges or surcharges to users that require extended timeframes to mitigate FOG pass-through to the city. So while they're discharging FOG and trying to construct their pretreatment, install pretreatment devices, the city has a mechanism by being compensated for the additional cost of treating that high-strength wastewater in that interim period. But the cons would include, although the FOG program fees can be minimal and equitably assessed to FSCs, gaining FSC support for program fees will require FSC education outreach of the importance and the need for an effective FOG program. And FSC education outreach can be pursued through FOG program brochures, holding an FSC FOG program workshop, and direct education outreach during city FSC inspection events, or all three. And Element 6 policy is considered to be a best FOG program implementation strategy, especially when combined with Elements 1 through 5. But Element 6 policy can only be adopted by code, city code. So I'd like to give you a really quick update on the city success stories and implementing a strategy 2 approach. Namely, the city has reached out to two dischargers, Fred Myers and Dairy Queen. Both of these FSCs were identified by the Public Works Community Development Department as problematic FOG hotspot contributors. The city worked with each FSC to identify and implement an effective FOG reduction measure. And these include FSCs implementing FOG reduction in kitchen BMPs and providing related step education outreach training, and the FSCs increasing the FOG program pretreatment device maintenance and inspection and cleaning frequencies. This had very substantial impact, and the efforts resulted in reducing FOG discharges to the city sewer and reduced sewer line cleaning frequency in these hotspot areas, which I would say is very effective. So good job. Lastly, we'd like to review just the next steps moving forward, is just to obtain your council input on the strategy elements we talked about tonight, to get your feedback on what elements you'd like to see implemented. And again, we can use a phased approach to implementing these strategies. And then we will go and prepare draft FOG program policy language, ordinance resolution, or BMPs for your city and county city attorney review. Meeting number 2 with you all, presenting an overview of the FOG program policy elements, the draft elements, and requirements for city council feedback and input. Submit final FOG program policy for city staff and city attorney review and incorporate their comments. And then meetings. I recommend having meetings with your local restaurant association and waste haulers to review the proposed FOG program policy elements, This is very common, and the regulated community really would appreciate getting their feedback and being educated during the workshop. It's my experience that works out very well if you do include them. And then finally, the FOG program policy adoption by the City Council. And,
Thank you.
and thank you so much for your
Thanks.
time tonight. I know you're dealing with a lot of very serious issues, and but I'm happy to answer any questions you may have.
So thank you. So this isn't a lot to digest because there's a lot of different options here. So Jennifer, I know that you've reviewed this. Do you have a suggestion on where to start, maybe, or maybe give us which one maybe we should start looking at? Because for us to try to come up, I don't know how the rest of you feel. I looked at this prior, and still there's a lot to try to determine how to move forward. Maybe we can get a suggestion from Jennifer where to start at least, what she's recommending as far as staff goes.
I agree.
So, I think one thing the council may want to consider is really just the good strategy, which incorporates the elements 1 and 2. And, we have a lot of it in place, it's just not formalized. And then this way we can work on implementing it over the next year and getting all the approvals. And maybe in a year, if you guys want to evaluate this, we can maybe upgrade the program to be better or best.
So you said 3?
No, I've said one.
The strategy 1.
1, okay.
Element 1 and 2.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. So, Suzanne, we're not stuck with all the, like on 1. I mean, can't we find a way to make sure that the FSCs come up with a way to present to the city that they've been maintaining their systems?
The best way to go about doing that is to perform a survey of what current pretreatment practices and devices the customers currently have. You could prepare a survey of questions that the FSCs could complete, and that gives you a good snapshot of what type of not just cooking and kitchen cleaning practices they have, but their pretreatment device. What type of pretreatment devices do they currently have? Do they have any at all? They could characterize all of those activities on a survey form, and then you can review what the current status is as far as the level of treatment and management your FSCs are currently providing. And after reviewing that, then you could use a phased approach of prioritizing your high fog discharging customers and get those customers placed on the program, review and evaluate and educate the customers, and prioritize implementing the program with that approach.
So, I don't know how the rest of you feel, but since this is something that I've been, first of all, I think we need to remember this was a priority of ours to address, council priority. And I know it's something that I think I brought up more than once. So I know being in the business, prior to being in the business, and Carmen can step in anytime because he still is, but we have grease traps, and they are supposed to, by I think our regulations, supposed to be maintained and taken care of. And I know that is not the case in many instances, just because I know by some other restaurateurs that I've interacted with. I also know that there's probably a large amount of food establishment places, FACs, that are not having their grease traps maintained by a waste management facility or entity. I know I did. I'm not sure if you do, Carmen.
Oh, yeah.
And they would come on a regular basis, and they would come on a basis to tell me, hey, Joe, summer's coming, you're increasing volume, we need to step this up. Instead of every 3 months, we need to go to once a month, and they would tell you. What I'm hoping is that we can interact with these groups, and they need to submit this to us when they get their business licenses renewed, and if they don't, then we have a way to regulate this. I mean, we have this in place, and I think that we can implement that into number 1. And there's not a lot of waste management facilities that handle this right now. But they would almost be, we could require them to turn in documentation and to inform us what's happening, because they know better than we, or trying to send our inspectors out to find out what's happening. Because what happens on a grease trap, for those that don't deal with it, if you don't maintain them, then it just goes into the line and it clogs it up, and you can bypass the grease trap itself by not maintaining it.
So we've talked about, this is a pretty big issue when it comes to our treatment. And I guess I'm just all about the numbers today. What kind of a number could we put on this, on what it could save in time, staff, time having to deal with this? Is this a constant, just for the public to know how big of an impact implementing a program could?
It goes back to the staff that it impacts primarily is the collections work, because they have to maintain these sites that are clogged, and they have to remove the grease, the out of the grease. So it's hard for me to answer that just because I don't have those numbers, because we don't have it in-house.
Well, that'll be a good number to have someday.
Yeah. You know, and
Which we might have.
So, you know, I have a fog prevention device at our establishment, and we get it cleaned on a very regular basis and do increase it during the summertime. But no one prior to me opening my business told me I had to do it at any certain time or
Right.
at all. And so I went for a while not even knowing that I needed to clean it. I was, you know, I guess it's just something that if you open a restaurant, you're not necessarily aware of everything and how everything works. So I think having a program that is educational would be extremely beneficial, and that a record of cleaning or maintenance would be really good. We basically do that with, we do that with fire suppression systems.
Mm-hmm.
And then the fire suppression system cleaner or maintainer comes through and tags everything, so that we have a record of when it was last dealt with. I think one way you could do that is a similar inspection tag that every business gets. They get it, you get your whatever cleaning company comes through, cleans it, stamps your tag, and then if there's any problems that arise within the line that you're connected to, they can go back and look and say, hey, you need to be within compliance. That's another way to do it. You know, it won't always be traced back to a specific business. It's a collection of many different lines that can create a blockage in the city system, of course. But I think that I personally think we should probably go past strategy 1. That would be my.
Yeah, and the only reason I don't mind starting there is because I think I want to be sensitive, because this is hitting the establishments that have been hit hardest through COVID-19.
Mm-hmm.
And so, I think I want to be somewhat sensitive to really, hammer them with another cost, even though I think that it's more of an educational, you need to move forward and get this done. And then I definitely believe that we should move forward on, maybe moving to stage 2 and stage 3. I mean, I think we definitely need to move up, because I think the better we are preparing and doing this, the more it will save us in our collections and costs.
Maybe not all at once, though.
Correct.
Not be shut down, then have to figure all that out. Yeah. No.
But, I'll give you an example. KFC used to be over here, because use them, they're gone. So behind where the laundromat is, right? And I remember that they had to dig up the whole line because it was solid. It was solid with grease.
Mm-hmm.
They couldn't even just clean it out. They had to replace the whole line.
Yeah.
Because they didn't have a grease trap program in maintaining it. So it's something that is costing the city on a regular basis. And the point is that, again, this is a regulation we have. It's not something that we're maintaining and making sure it's done. And some of the businesses are doing it and some are not. And I think that we need to make sure that it's being done, number one, for the city. But if some are doing it, then they all should do it. That's my point. If we have a regulation out there, then everyone should be following the regulation, because it's not fair to the ones that are, letting the ones that are not to get away with it. So it just needs to be a balance.
I think that we could start out pretty light, and then maybe just throwing that card idea out, like a little stamp or like a little validation card of how often you've cleaned your fog prevention device, if that was just included in the business license for food service establishments, you know, not necessarily at this point in time an issue of, financial infractions or anything like that, but we would at least collect some data, and people would be aware that, at the top, it must be, should be cleaned every 3 months or every 2 months, a recommended guideline, and then from there, people would be aware, and then maybe we could step up from there. Something like that.
Well,
Couldn't
it may give you information too. Just, awareness programs are great just
Yep.
because, I do laundry every week, but I don't always think about cleaning out the dryer vent, until somebody told me. So awareness is a key in that, but it also can give you numbers down the road after you implement a program like that to how effective it is and if you need to step it up even further.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
I think that we need to get the waste haulers involved in some fashion fairly quick, maybe after the first year or something, because if we say they have to have somebody doing this, then it changes the dynamic. Because, you can say you're doing it, on your own, but, it depends how well you do it too. I mean, first of all, I don't want to deal with it.
No
if
way.
we ever had to. But second of all, I know that if I had an employee do it, because I didn't want to do it, it's not going to get done properly, I guess. And so you're going to have some of this happening. So at some point, I think that the waste haulers, waste management with these people need to get involved. And we need to say that's mandatory to have somebody come in and do this. Whoever it may be, as long as they're, certified. There's only a few in town that do it anyway, I think. So.
I like that. So is this something that the environmental specialist would be handling then?
Exactly.
Okay, perfect. So, yeah.
Sorry, Carmen. No. You good? Okay. I just wanted to thank staff because this was a council priority and we've been talking about this for a little while now. So thank you for bringing this to us. And I concur that we should take baby steps and continue to educate. And I also wanted to thank Susanna for all of her efforts in putting this proposal together.
Absolutely.
Yes, thank you. It's not an easy task. I'm glad that you've been dealing with it and have got a plan for us to move forward on. So does everyone agree to start with Plan 1 and then have staff come up with some fashion of maybe tweaking it if we need to and bringing it back to us?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have a couple of questions. If we choose to take over operations and maintenance of the entire collection system, doesn't it logically that this falls under that?
Mm-hmm.
So this could be part of that department's responsibilities?
It's all related.
I mean, it just makes sense to me that, and am I correct in assuming, because I tried to do some reading, I've never owned a restaurant, so I don't know a whole lot about this, but there are actually some cities that have staff people that this is their job. They go from business to business and they inspect them and make sure that there's compliance. Now, I'm not promoting the fact that we ought to do that from day one, but I'm just saying this is such a problem. It seems like that this is such a problem that there are cities that go that far because it's an issue. And so I totally agree with the mayor that this has been on our agenda it's been a council goal for a while, and we really need to move forward.
Yeah, I would say that wastewater management has been a huge topic for my first term as part of the city council, and this system is essential to our city running smoothly. And I think eventually it'll probably need to get to that point where we have a staff member who goes around and checks for compliance at some point in time.
I would be remiss, though, if I didn't ask how many restaurant establishments do we have? Again, about the numbers. How big of a job is that?
Well, Joe used to be the president of Orla. Do you know that number off the top of your head?
Not for Coos Bay.
Okay.
But I
Right,
mean,
you-
they get business license, it wouldn't be hard to generate that number.
It wouldn't, but to give you a sense of the scope, we placed all of the restaurants that are staying open during the COVID freeze on last week's Friday update.
Oh,
But that
right.
included Coos Bay, North Bend, and Charleston. It is a very long list.
Yeah, it would surprise you. And then to add to that, which Suzanne has done in here, you have the grocery stores, all of them participate in preparing food. And so when you start getting into that,
Oh my gosh,
it opens it up, and then you have, you have the North Bend Medical Center that has some food operation, you have the hospital that has operations, it just goes on, so,
It's huge.
yeah.
It can be a huge problem, and
That's a
I'd
good-
say it already
that's
has
a good
been,
point.
so.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's more than just restaurants that are in that category, so.
All right.
Well,
All right.
I believe we have direction, and staff will come back with next steps.
And again, Suzanne, thank you so much.
Thank you,
And I know
Jonathan.
that we'll probably be talking to you. I know we will, and to help us get this under control. Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, so I'm happy to contribute. Thank you so much.
Uh-huh.
You have
a
a
good
nice
day, good
evening.
holiday.
Yes, happy Turkey Day.
Yeah, right. Happy something day, correct. All right. Next
Thank
item
you.
is going to be discussion regarding Jacobs Agreement 3 for the operations and maintenance of the wastewater system. And so it's the Jennifer and Jim show. So here we go.
Okay, well, this started when the city contracted with Mark Walter of Water Dude back in about a year ago. And he did an audit or an evaluation of our wastewater systems operation and maintenance contractor. And he determined that the service level was below acceptable levels in several areas. And this was consistent with the previous 3 audits had been performed on behalf of the city of the contract for wastewater maintenance and operations. So on July 14th, 2020, he presented his findings and options to the council, each of which had pros and cons. And the council directed staff to work with Jacobs to craft an agreement for fiscal year FYE 21, which we're in now. And this is what we call Amendment 3 to that contract.
So Jennifer, you have anything to add, or?
Well, I can go on if you'd like.
Yes, I'm sorry. I went and got coffee and I lost track of where you were at.
Yeah, that's all right. So, while we did this Amendment 3 and worked on it for the last several months, we also had Jacob's performance issues that they were addressing. And I do want to say that they did do some things to address what we believe were performance issues. You might recall at the last council meeting, staff reported to the council that Jacobs had provided the city a management team that had shown expertise in wastewater treatment, the likes that had not been served by staff in several years. However, recently, unfortunately, staff was informed that a key person in the management team resigned, and also that the existing management team, to staff's knowledge, will not be long-term, but rather temporary until the management positions can be filled. As documented in the audits, there are concerns with the excessive turnover of management that Jacobs has experienced, along with employee and operator turnover. A positive action that took place this last year is that they hired an outside contractor to take care of the sludge from our and haul it off-site from our lagoon. And they did that at their expense with significant amount of in-house man-hours. They hauled and land applied also biosolids to the local farms so that they, while we don't have capacity at the lagoon that we had historically had, the efforts this last summer has given the city the capacity that it needs so we don't have to perform an emergency removal. Jacobs also expended numerous hours reducing the work orders that city staff generates as a result of sewer investigations for capital improvement projects, locates for sewer laterals, sinkhole investigation, and so on. Up until recently, they had over 40 outstanding work orders, and some of them were over a year old, and this has been reduced significantly and is now at manageable levels. Now, I'll focus more on the Amendment 3. Staff has been coordinating with Jacobs' representative, Mr. Rodriguez, for several months regarding the revision of Amendment 3, with the goal of trying to negotiate a fair amendment that meets the objectives of the council's direction. Staff has approached the negotiations based on a letter that documented both staff and council's concerns. While the negotiations have resolved some of the items in the letter, there still are several items that either have been requested to be deferred to Amendment 4, such as the collection cleaning program, or have not been agreed to, such as the punitive or liquidated damages for unmet contractual obligations related to deliverables. They did, however, agree to liquidated damages related to failure to meet permit if it's their error. Furthermore, we cannot agree on language that holds Jacobs responsible to budget and manage the wastewater asset. With all this going on, the plants are still not consistently meeting permit. There might be some instances where the reasons for permit exceedance are out of operator control, but staff feels strongly that the majority of the exceedances were preventable. Staff concern is that in an effort to tighten the terms of this agreement, the agreement has turned into a very prescriptive document that may not be effective. The old agreement was more performance-based, where the focus was on outcome, that is, operating and maintaining the wastewater asset at a level of service that is standard in the industry. And this worked many years for both parties. But it's difficult to write a contract that includes every single scope of work and enforceable consequences when that scope is not met. Another concern is the significant cost increase of over 30% from last fiscal year. The reasons cited by Jacobs are additional testing and additional full-time employees. When we questioned the additional FTEs, why they were required, we were told that the new plant 2 needs more labor hours due to the plant being more technical and more things to monitor. Jacobs contends that the more advanced a facility is, results in more labor needs. This came as a surprise to us because our engineers from Jacobs had told us that by going this route with this new plant, we would actually might see a reduction in labor to operate it. Mr. Rodriguez also stated that the old contract did not account for the cost or necessary level of effort required to run a wastewater asset such as Coos Bay. He further stated that this Amendment 3 is a realignment of the true cost of service required by the city. Staff has repeatedly told Mr. Rodriguez that a 30% increase is going to be very difficult to get approved. And he understands the sensitivity of this issue and has explored some ideas internally to give a one-time credit to reduce the 30% increase. And he'll be available to talk about that. So the options, I think you talked about this earlier, staff has identified at least 2 that you can consider. There's certainly others. The original contract has provisions that if both parties cannot agree on a fee increase, then it defaults to an increase based on the average consumer price index from December of the prior year. So typically that's been in the 3 to 4% range. If this option is chosen, then I would anticipate that Jacobs would want to terminate the contract with the city, and we'll have to implement a transition plan to take over the sewer system, both collection and treatment. Or we can accept the approximately 30% increase and work with Jacobs on a transition plan to take over the collection system on July 1st. Now, Mr. Rodriguez has a PowerPoint that he can share with you on his perspective on Amendment 3 or just answer questions for you.
Before we start, Mr. Rodriguez, let me just ask you this. Does Jacobs want to continue a relationship in this moving forward? Councilor Kramer asked, and I think it's a very prudent comment, because to my feeling, a year ago, I asked you that question, and I was told by you, yes, and here we are. I get the feeling that's not the case, that maybe it's just best that we end and go our separate ways, or am I wrong?
So our goal and our focus has been on trying to figure out how we can work together so we can continue to provide services. That is what we would like to do. We would prefer to continue with the scope that we have, which includes the collection system. But like I have commented to staff, at the same time that I say that that's what I would like to do, I would also want to make sure that I respect your decisions. And if you decide that it's more beneficial for you to separate some of the scope, we would certainly be willing to look for options to help you sort that out in the most effective manner. But we definitely are committed to trying to continue to work together and continue to provide services for the city. I think the best confirmation I can offer of that is the significant amount of effort and resources that we have dedicated over the last year to try to address some of the concerns that were brought to me. That has been done precisely because of our interest to salvage the relationship and become a long-term service provider.
So am I hearing that Jacobs wants to move forward in a relationship and manage this for us, or they rather not?
We would prefer to continue to work together and continue to provide services for the city, yes.
So council, do you want to see the PowerPoint by Mr. Rodriguez, or you just want to ask questions, or how would you like to proceed here?
If he's prepared it, we should probably take a look at it.
Okay, so if you have a PowerPoint and like to go through it with us, we'd like to see it then.
Sounds good. I appreciate that, and I'll try to be brief. Before I start, I want to very, very quickly add to the comments around Jan Kerro's retirement. I've only worked with her for a short time, but her dedication and commitment was absolutely evident, and she is a great resource. So I just wanted to add that comment there. Let me share my screen. Give me 1 second. Hopefully you're able to see the screen. I just wanted to cover a couple topics. Are you able to see the screen that I'm sharing?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to cover a few quick topics. Culture of caring, some of the recent accomplishments, the proposed amendment summary details, pricing details, and next steps. A culture of caring is something that we typically do, and I try to share a couple of things with my team, and I just picked a few that I think are applicable to everybody in any role, on things that we can do to help ourselves and help people around us. Taking a deep breath, laughing when we have an opportunity, and reaching out for help or to offer help are 3 simple tasks that I always try to remind my teams and my resources as things that are easy for us to do, that can help us cope and can help us manage with the different challenges we have in life. This has become even more critical now in COVID times, where there's a lot more isolation and people are dealing with a lot of challenges at home and at work. So I thought I would share this quick highlight. Some of the recent accomplishments that I wanted to highlight as part of our commitment to drive some of the improvement that I heard loud and clear included the biosolids lagoon cleaning that was mentioned already, the addressing of the work order backlog, some new maintenance strategies for facilities and systems, the enhancements on metrics, tools, and reports for systems like maintenance connection and hot WIMS that we provide for the city. The significant efforts we invested on improving the approach towards collections line cleaning, which right now I'm happy to report that we are on track and slightly ahead of schedule on a 5-year cycle. We've invested efforts on an updated standard operating procedures, an enhanced monthly report, and a few special projects around cleaning and repairs for the facilities. We also had some additional support for the city needs and some unexpected events. Provided city access to hot whims and maintenance connection for additional transparency and data sharing, supporting efforts on the recent EQ basing cover protection to manage some high winds that affected the area. The water board hauling of about 100,000 gallons of water for disposal. Running a chemically enhanced treatment study. An ongoing influence study that was mentioned earlier. Some joint efforts to drive an expedited recovery of pump station number 4. And these are just kind of a few examples. On the topic of permit compliance, I'm the first one to acknowledge that we're not where we want to be. Our target, it's always to have a zero excursion goal. But I do wanted to highlight that for both plants, we have been driving some significant efforts to drive those numbers down, and we have made some good progress. Again, we're not where we need to be yet, but I'm confident that we are in the right track and that we will continue to deliver improvement on these areas. As far as the proposed amendment, at a very high level, we are including some new penalties for preventable water quality excursions. We are including increased staffing levels to deliver on the expectations of the city and be able to consistently do that. We have enhanced processes and documentation for capital improvements, capital expenditures. The enhanced biosolids handling protocols, including the identification of land availability for the needs of the system. Tightened timeframes and schedules for key topics and deliverables. We have an improved training program. New prioritization of collection lines televising, new approach for enhanced building and facilities maintenance, and some other cosmetic improvements that we work together with staff. I do want to add that I agree with the previous comments from Jim. The contract, it's a lot more structured now based on the amendment. It's a lot more strict. It has a lot more, let's say, more meat on the bone, but it also makes it a lot more difficult and more tough to manage. My communications with staff have always been along the lines of we're providing this additional language because we want to demonstrate our commitment. We want to confirm that we want to continue to work with you. But my intention is that we continue to work together so that any expectations and any need that may come up, we work together to address them. I do not want us to manage the service by pulling the letter of the contract. I want to have the contract as a comfort document for the city, but I want us to continue to work the way we have been for the last few months in making sure that we are talking to each other and adapting to each other as needed. As far as the pricing details, at a high level, we are talking about a significant increase. The number comes to $2.2 million, roughly, with the direct cost included right here on the slides. We are also increasing the repairs amount, mainly because we want to make sure that the systems are maintained properly and that we are not shortchanging certain facilities for some short-term savings that will have some long-term impact. As part of this evaluation and to try to help mitigate a little bit the big increase that we're talking about, we are prepared to provide a $60,000 credit in the manner or the form of a $10,000 reduction on our management fee for every remaining month of the current agreement. On the main drivers for the the cost increase. There's many, but I wanted to highlight a few of the ones that I think are more critical. I believe the previous escalation adjustment did not really keep up with actual costs. There is additional staff that we have included, but in addition to that, we have seen an increase on the actual rates for staffing and the price of benefits. Chemicals is another item that there has been an increase in not just usage, but the pricing of the actual chemical. With new permits, we have additional sampling. We do have an increased maintenance focus for the facilities and the system, an improved biosolids land application approach that ensures that we are in a good place and we don't have to do special projects like the one we had to do this year. And we also have enhanced project support. And I wanted to show here real quick a little diagram that identifies an excess of 6,600 hours that we also provide as support to the project. Obviously, not all of that is included in our direct costs, but a big part of that is what we can offer as part of the value that we bring, and because of our size, we're able to do that. But it includes multiple categories, such as safety, compliance, technical support, operations, and topics like that. As next steps, assuming that there is an agreement that we want to move in this direction, we could finalize the details on the amendment, which I think it's, I would say 95% there. We would do a reconciliation to align the details with the amendment. We would process the credits that we have identified. And we would need to start on the review process for the next amendment, mainly to determine if we are going to look at a reduced scope for the collection side, that we do it with enough time so you can have a smooth transition if that is what you choose to do. I do want to maybe ask that if you move in that direction, that if you haven't, that you consider the condition we're in now and the significant improvement that we have made over the last year or so. I believe we really have put our best foot forward and drive a lot of improvement. And I would prefer if we are able to use that as confirmation that we have gotten it to the right level, and that allows us to move past the issues that we had in the past. But again, if that is not the case, we will work with you on implementing a solution that makes sense for the city. And regardless of what we decide to do with the scope, my goal is that we continue to working together on addressing unexpected events, on prioritizing resources and efforts, and enhancing the service and value that we provide to the city. And with that, I just want to again thank the staff for the patience and the time and their engagement. I came into I'm going to call a difficult situation, but they were very graceful in allowing me the opportunity to drive some of the improvement that I knew we could deliver. And I realize there's still some work to do, but I do believe we have made some really good progress. And I have to admit that it is in part because of that coordination and partnership. And with that, I'm available for any questions on this or the collections topic or anything else that council may want to ask.
I was just going to ask, is it possible to have this sent to our staff so we can, look through this? It's a little hard to see on our screens we have here.
Have you seen this?
Yes.
This presentation?
We briefly saw about 2 or 3 hours.
So you have it then?
Okay.
No, we don't.
We don't have it, no.
Oh, is it possible for you to send that to our staff?
Yes, I will send that today. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thanks. So what is the, okay, first of all, this 30% cost increase that we're talking about, when does it start, or is it retroactive for this year? retroactive. All right.
Yeah, it would be retroactive for this year. We have, even though we don't have the amendment as part of the commitment we made, we have behaved assuming that the amendment would take place, and driven a lot of the improvement and a lot of the costs to address this. I can share with council that our costs far exceed the direct costs that are included here. And that's a decision we made because of our interest in demonstrating our commitment. We realized there's some risk with that, but we were hoping that that could help us improve the relationship.
So, Mr. Rodriguez, you're talking about a 30% increase retroactive, but you've also just went on to state that this increase would bring on more personnel, but we haven't had more personnel prior to this, but you want to charge us for it? Am I understanding that correctly?
No, we actually have had additional personnel, actually more than what we're proposing overall, when you take into account the staff that we have locally at the project and the support staff that we have provided. We have far exceeded the numbers that we're including in our pricing.
Well, this 30% retroactive, with all due respect, I mean, we have not had very good service up to this point, and this increase is supposed to make the service better. So it's hard for me to say that we should give 30% for something that we haven't had, I guess. That's what I'm trying to get to the point of. I mean, we've had a bad reputation. We have many violations. I mean, it's embarrassing to hear that we have a new plant and we have violation after violation after violation. And this is directly related to you, but we are the ones that are facing this on a daily basis or a frequently basis. Second of all, how much is this 30% cost going to cost? What's the bottom line cost? Do we know, Nicole? 30% would be how much?
I think Jennifer has that.
2,400,000 with their credit, it's approximately $2,470,000.
More?
Oh, than what we paid last year.
Yes.
Last year we paid $1,000,000. I didn't do that.
So it's about $1 million?
No.
No.
Oh, it's 30%. Got it.
Yeah, it's almost $500,000.
How much?
$500,000.
$500,000? That's including the $60,000 credit? Okay.
Could I ask a question of the city attorney? Is there language in this contract that just says that they can ask for an increase? Or, I mean, I thought the contract was for them to perform.
The contract does require that on a yearly basis we negotiate and attempt to come to an agreement. If there's not, there's a built-in escalation. I think it's based on CPI, if not mistaken, which is somewhere around 3 to 4%.
So while I'm sensitive to the fact that they've got overruns in expenditures, when that happens in my business, I have to eat it because I agreed to a price. And so I'm wondering why are we finding ourselves in this position?
I think one of the challenges that we encountered was that when we identified what the direct costs were, and we presented those to the city, and they came out as a number that was higher than the previous year, that created the concerns that delayed us significantly into identifying an agreed position. At the same time, we start working on enhancements and additions to the contract that make that a little bit more cumbersome, and it dragged us into this situation of us having to perform in certain cases doing scope that is in addition to what the contract contemplates. In some cases, addressing new expectations that we are happy to do, but are additional to what was in the original contract, which all results into the situation we're in after the fact, which is clearly not ideal.
So are you saying that the city changed the scope of work?
So as part of the the changes that have happened. For example, Plan 2 came online, and we have not captured the impact of that. We have 2 new permits that came online. We have not captured the impact of that. We have had increasing chemical usage and chemical costs that we have not captured yet. And all of those things kind of added to the topics that we were reviewing. And it made for a much more complicated scenario than a typical year-on-year revision. Typically, this would have been a much more simpler process, but a number of topics happen at the same time that we had to address.
So, you know, you may have to just really dumb it down for me to understand, but is that your fault for not anticipating this when you signed the contract, or is it the city's fault because we changed the scope of work?
So I don't think that it's really anybody's fault. I think that the timing of certain things made it a little bit challenging on everybody. The way the contract is structured, we do have an annual opportunity to present the direct costs based on the realities of the system. And when we did that for this year, we found ourselves with the number of topics that we talked about that resulted in the situation we're in.
So you can certainly understand our position in that the city budgeted a certain amount of money based on a contract that we had entered into in good faith. And we can't just go to the taxpayers and say, oh, by the way, Jacobs needs more money, so we're going to raise your rates again. We budgeted and we acted in good faith because we signed a contract with you. I'm trying to understand why all of a sudden now we need to come up with another $500,000.
So I think part of the topic that affects that are the things that have changed since the contract was originally signed. And the realignment that has been needed because of some of those changes, it's the main driver. At the same time, the additional expectations or additional requirements on new language in the contract are additional changes in the agreement that all add to the position we're in.
Wait, so who changed the additional requirements?
So the additional requirements were mainly driven by the city. The additional scope were mainly driven by the needs of the system. Right? That's probably the simplest way of categorizing. That's my perspective. I mean, if anybody has a different view, please chime in.
I think staff has a different perspective on that. I think what we were trying to do, in accordance to the direction of the council, we were trying to put language within the contract that would hold Jacobs accountable to actually perform. Some of our attempts to require them to be accountable was not acceptable to them, and they wouldn't. But those parts that were acceptable, no doubt increased the cost. I would tell you that I know Jim has told you 2 options that you have. What's still on the table is you have 3 options. Your other option is to, well, you actually have more than 3, but I'll give you a third one and a fourth one. Your third option would be to just say, no, we're going to do the fallback. I would assume, because Jacobs is not in the business for losing money, that they will want to terminate. And we're already, while some things are better, we're still suffering water quality issues from time to time. And if you take that route, between now and the transition, we may have more problems. I would offer and suggest that what you may want to consider is agreeing to a price increase for this year with the caveat that we have a pathway towards a smooth transition for the city to take over the whole utility.
So, Mr. Rodriguez, how do I want to put this? I mean, I'm really having struggling that we have to pay 30% retroactive on something, what is it, would it cost? I mean, are there any negotiating? I know Seth's been talking about this, to have this negotiations be from this point on. I mean, instead of going backwards. I mean, I just don't know how we justify trying to raise or come up with that kind of money for something past.
Well, I think that the challenge with that is that that would make for a somewhat unfair practice, right? If whenever we provide a direct cost, we just spend month and month negotiating to then come back and say that doing it retroactive, it's unreasonable. It's basically asking us to subsidize that cost. And I don't think that's an appropriate approach, respectfully.
But you haven't been able to hold your end of the contract by keeping us out of permit violations, so.
I have a question on that. One of the components in your presentation that I understood is that you have a penalty for excursions, and I'm assuming that the exceedance, those are some of the most visible things to our citizens as well as ourselves. How many have we had since January? Do we know?
Let me see if I happen to have that number here. I do not have it by year, but I would guess that maybe it's in the 5 range. Jennifer, maybe you can help me with that, if you remember.
Closer to 15, I think.
How many?
15.
15.
Down from what, Jennifer? And how does that compare to the 6 months prior to that? Is it lower, or is it pretty consistent?
Proud to say.
Okay. So my next question is, and Roger kind of alluded to that, I know I run a business, and I just don't understand how you can continue to operate at a loss and still provide an assurance to the city after the contract is signed that these improvements will continue to be made. Usually when you are operating at a loss, you have to figure out a way to recover that somehow. And generally, that's people, services, maintenance, I'm assuming. I mean, I don't know if you can answer that. It sounds kind of rhetorical, but how do you do that?
So you're absolutely right. Typically, that is a cost that we would like to recover. Having said that, we do recognize that there were a number of things that should have been addressed earlier. And I am committing to not needing to recover those additional costs that we have invested to date, and those additional costs that we would probably need to continue to invest for the next few months while we get things to a stable place. But the proposed fee that we are including would get us into a position where we can continue to deliver the quality of service that I believe you're expecting from us consistently, and not do it at a loss after a few more months of continuing to streamline the operations and backfilling some of the positions that we have open.
So, Mr. Rodriguez, this is Councilor Miles, and I've been on this council for just a couple of years now. And in that 2 years, this is probably the 3rd or 4th time a representative from Jacobs has presented to this council and given us explanations for their inadequacies and made promises for improvement. So how do you think this council should hold you accountable? Because asking for 30% raise for inadequate service does not seem to show much accountability.
I think part of the challenge that I'm having is that the way that this is being looked at is we're adding 30% of a fee for the same scope and for not doing things the way that we're supposed to. And I don't think that really captures the reality of the situation. I think it's far more complex, particularly because of the scope changes some of the expectation changes, and I hesitate a little bit to say this, but I could see a situation where in the past my predecessors may have put a higher value on keeping costs down, perhaps at the expense of certain items that later became a bit of a challenge. I do not know this for a fact, but it's something that has crossed my mind. And what we're trying to do is to realign the scope, realign the resources so that we do not get into that situation. Because in the time that I've worked with the city, I have learned that you care about your systems and you want to do what's right. You want to be cost effective, but you do not want your assets to be neglected. And what we have developed is something that would allow us to do that moving forward.
Well, this is Councilor Kilmer again. Wastewater treatment is one of the biggest priorities that we have. And, you know, if I have heard in my business of issues, not just from staff, but council, citizens, I mean, the citizens have had input on this as well, I would attempt to make every effort to prove myself before I ask for an increase.
Yeah, that's where, this is Councilor DeNovo. You know, you started your presentation off with culture of caring, and you also, I think, one of your standards are culture of caring means going beyond compliance. It's not something we do, it's who we are. The city staff has just cited 15 incidents that negatively impacted water quality, and if I understand, to put it simply, your solution is to charge us 30% more for not following your standard. Well, it's not fair to the citizens.
And on top of it, you know, Roger, I think you mentioned, or Mr. Rodriguez mentioned, part of the reason you have 30% increase is because we're asking for more accountability, I guess is a better way to put it. But we haven't had that accountability prior to this time frame. But you're expecting to charge us, Mr. Rodriguez, for something that we haven't had? I mean, that's what I'm really wrestling with here. And I guess my second question is, how much is it going to cost us just to phase out of this contract with you and end in this next fiscal year? What will the cost be?
I do not have an answer to that. If that is the decision that the council takes, I will work with staff to help you develop the necessary schedules and the necessary details so that you can have a well-informed decision. I haven't looked at that detail yet.
I just think it's something that we need to have on the table. I mean, we're at a crossroads that we need to decide, you know, whether we take this on and you help us phase out of this and what that cost would cost us, or we figure out, because 30%, as far as I'm concerned, is unacceptable. It's unacceptable because we haven't had what you're asking for prior to this time. I could see maybe 30% from this point on, but anything prior to that, I think we need to have a different negotiating cost, and that's how I feel.
When does this contract end?
Fiscal year.
The end of this fiscal year. And I would just back up a little bit that generally your contract tells you when you're supposed to be reviewing contract amendments, and you should have already had this contract amendment, but I would say to Mr. Rodriguez's credit, it got behind with his predecessors. We were behind last year, and you were approving last year's contract almost at the end of the contract period, and then you began. In fact, I believe we did approve it after the end of the contract period, and then we began on this one when we're already into it.
I understand, but we still met with Mr. Rodriguez in January, and that gave, 6 months to come up with a contract or cost associated?
10 months.
Well, from January to June for this
June.
fiscal year, right? So, I mean, I understand that there's been some issues, Mr. Rodriguez, and you stepped into a situation that has caused you some issues, but I think that we need to start looking at all the options, and one is maybe terminating and find out what the cost is, or second of all, as far as I'm concerned, I'm not sure how the rest of the council feels, that this 30% is not something that I'm willing to accept, and we need to come up with a different figure.
Well,
Those are my options.
I've been around here long enough, attending meetings as part of the media, to have seen what the private contractor, I go back and I look through, the recesses of my mind, and I'm like, wow, we've come a really long way to get to this point, and pretty rapidly. The fact is, we should be able to look at the outcomes and say, this is great, those are measurable, we see improvements, we see all of these things. We shouldn't be seeing more problems arising at this stage of the game. I mean, this has been ongoing for a while. And the fact that our staff, our attorney have to write prescriptive things into a contract for a service that you do for a living is very concerning. And again, I go back to, that is the basis for really a lack of confidence to continue on this. We have a responsibility to our environment, our citizens, and ourselves, and our staff.
So council, you've heard what's been discussed. I mean, and I think staff has some kind of idea and direction where we're at. Do you want to just let them proceed with it and see what they can come back with?
Well, I
I mean-
think did staff want to review the PowerPoint presentation?
Yeah, they can.
Is there new information in that, or?
Yeah, but I don't think that's going to justify, in my mind, a 30% increase.
Yeah.
I mean, it's just not. I don't know how the rest of you feel, but it just won't, I can't comprehend how we can get to 30%, retroactive. So that's where I'm coming from. I think that the 30% is too much. I don't know how the rest of that council feels. I think that needs to be renegotiated in some fashion that maybe will be palatable and that we can explain to our citizens why we would do something like this. Because 30% is not something I can justify. Or we need to come up with a figure that can get us through us taking this over until this next fiscal year and what that cost would be. That's my suggestion.
Is this on the agenda for our next council meeting?
No, and I don't think there'd be time to meet since your next council meeting is a week from tonight.
Right.
And you have a holiday in the middle. We're going to basically have 2 business days in between now and our next meeting.
Right, and I guess to my point was, before the next council meeting, will you have time to go over this PowerPoint that he sends us and make a staff recommendation to the council? Or are you prepared to make that recommendation?
I'm getting a nod from our resident expert.
And, even if we can just get an update, maybe we won't come to a conclusion, but we can get some more data and some more information with the PowerPoint that Mr. Rodriguez has provided. And then if we have to move forward with another meeting. And I would suggest, this is such a huge topic and an expense, and it's just an asset that we have, that if we have to have a special meeting, not on a Tuesday, maybe we need to look at that because of the planning commission meeting on that Tuesday, if we need to meet in between.
Well, I think what's going to be important is, I know that, this is taped, this work session, but I think no matter what decision we make, we need to make sure that we really spell this out clearly to the citizens, because I know Councilor Kilmer and myself, we've been blistered from citizens being so dissatisfied with the service of Jacobs, and they don't understand, right? And so, in 2016, when we got elected, this was our first action, was to build this wastewater plant. Now we're at 2020, we haven't had good service, and so whatever we do, I just want to make sure that the public understands how we came to this situation.
Well, and we weren't even able to manage the expectations because we're still getting new information today on that plant.
Right.
Is everyone in agreement with what's kind of the direction?
Yeah.
And Mr. Rodriguez, I understand that you stepped into this and that you're just the messenger, but unfortunately you're getting, I think, some of the wrath of the council, or at least myself. So I apologize, but this is just something that, is very difficult for me to accept at this junction. So hopefully with staff and you can come up with something that will be more agreeable.
I fully understand, and I respect the difficult job the council has, and I completely understand. No need to apologize. I do have a question, if I may. Would it be of help if we could develop a fee that has a lower number, but with a completely different amendment tied to it? It obviously would have to remove certain items that we have been negotiating for the last 6 months. But if there is something that I can develop that at least gives you a better pricing, is that something that council would like to see?
I think it's something that we can look at. I mean, I don't think anything should be just thrown out, so I think it's something that at least we can, take a look at and evaluate with the staff.
So does that mean, again, sacrifice meeting compliance? If we're getting a lower price, we're not getting the same level of service that we haven't received yet?
That you're going to still run into the same issue either way. You've got the possibility of it.
Yeah, I think what you're going to find, if there's less scope of work, that means the more the city will have to take on, so we'll be paying one way or the other.
Right. We're taking on, so I mean, it's something we're going to have to do an analysis on, and maybe it's as a phase out. I don't know. I mean, we're taking on the collection system already. Do we take on another faction of it? I don't know. We have to look at it, and so we have to see what the cost is. But I can't say until the staff, Jennifer specifically, comes back and says, okay, this is where it's at.
So just for clarification for the public that's joined us, I'm sure there's 16,000 people on this right now. Nicole, how are we funding this contract? Is it rates? Is it a combination?
So we, thank you. We originally budgeted this year with a higher rate of cost of services across all of the Plant 1, Plant 2 collections for sewer and stormwater. It does not include that 30%. I mean, this is a little bit more than what we had budgeted, but I think Roger's already talked about, and Jennifer also. In order to meet that 30%, we would have to pull back on some capital projects, unplanned kind of emergencies. But we did budget a little bit higher this year.
So an increased contract, then, we are actually reaching into our citizens' pockets to pay for this 30% or a reduction in service.
Potentially. I mean, we've got to find a source to
potentially
cover
next
it.
year with a new contract, we're going to be asking for more because things generally don't go down.
So it's a choice.
price.
Don't do projects that we actually budgeted for, or charge the citizens of Coos Bay because we don't want to fund projects that we budgeted for. Is that correct?
Well, we typically don't do our rate increases until a little bit later in the year, and so we, our rate consultant can look at that, whether there needs to be a higher rate increase than what we typically would do, but at
Yeah,
this
I'm
point,
just
we'd be
saying, my
looking at-
point is, we're actually reaching into their pocketbook and saying, we need more money.
Yes.
So this is.
Well, she says we've
so
already been
Mr.
budgeted for it.
So,
for
Mr.
this.
Rodriguez, this is the concern I have, that Mr. Mayor has also expressed with a 30% increase at the 11th hour.
Well, my perception, for what it's worth, is that these cost increases will have to be accounted for somehow, whether we perform the service or whether the city performs the service. I don't believe that there is any excess built in. When I ask for options to lower the price, I would have to go back and figure out how can I get creative about it, because I did not mean reducing the level of service. I think what we have included in our scope is what needs to occur. It's what needs to happen for the systems to operate. So I think it is a difficult challenge, but I don't think it's limited to Jacobs being the service provider. I think it's the reality of some of the cost increases that have occurred that have not been reconciled yet.
But Mr. Rodriguez, all due respect, how do you charge us for something in the past that you haven't been giving us is really how I cannot just fathom how you can do that. I mean,
So
being in
we
business
have been
myself and all of us-
providing those services.
But all of us
We just
in
have-
business, if you're taking a loss, you take the loss, and you eat it, and then you move on from that point, because it was really your mistake, not ours. And, you know, for the charges for a 30% retroactive is just unfathomable to me. Anyway, I think
the challenge with that is the scope increases, the cost increases. Those are not things that are our fault or things that are within our control. There are things that have happened commercially and system-wide that have resulted in additional costs.
But they
that
are
we
your
haven't
fault
been able
because
to
you've been
resolve.
operating under this at this rate, because that's what you've been doing. If it's a problem, you should have brought to our attention much sooner than this. So it is your fault.
We brought it sooner. We just haven't been able to resolve it.
All right, I think we've gone far enough on this. So if you can get that information to staff, get those figures, and we'll make a decision from that point on. And I appreciate your time, and thank you.
Thank you very much for your time.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, so council, we have a few more items to take care of. One being, we have a homeless camp that's coming up, and a proposal, I think that we're all
Yeah.
we're all familiar with it, so we need to decide as a council, do you want to have that come to us to make a decision on this? Or do you want this to be to the homeless committee to make this decision and recommendation? Or do we want to meet and give parameters to the homeless committee and come back with that? So how do you want to handle this?
What timeframe was the proposer looking for? I mean, it seemed like a pretty quick timeline.
Well, I think what they're hoping is that they can actually open it no later than April 21. So I think, given the conflicting or the colliding timelines of everything else, if you want it to go to the homeless work group first, I'm not sure that the homeless work group's going to meet before the end of December, probably more likely the beginning of January. If you're asking for a recommendation, I would recommend that you at least take a presentation at your next work session on December 22nd, and then talk about what parameters you would like to be considered. And if you're wishing to consider the proposal at all, send it to the homeless work group with some sideboards of what you want them to come back with recommendations, and review it back in January.
I think that seems reasonable, because sometimes if it comes to the homeless work group and they really chew on it, it can take more than one meeting. So I think that, and they're good discussions to have, but I think your recommendation is probably better to get a presentation, cipher it down, and then send it.
I think it's a great idea, but I would like for the record to state that we told the citizens of Coos Bay that the site that is being considered was going to be an area, a park. We were going to, a natural area, because that is a place where people frequent to go clamming and shrimp.
Sand shrimp.
Sand shrimp, thank you. And so we have a lot of visitors that drive that highway. It's a scenic highway heading to the beaches. And so I think we need to give that consideration, as we committed already, communicating to the citizens that we would leave that in more of a park-like setting.
Okay, so I totally understand, Lucinda, but proposals being put forth, so we need to.
No, I'm happy to hear it.
Sure.
I just want to remind
Sure.
everyone
Yeah,
that
I
that's what we
totally-
said a while ago. I don't know if there's another location
Right.
that would be better, but that's what we communicated to the citizens.
So is everyone all right with Stephanie's suggestion that we listen to it and then put some parameters around it and have the homeless committee meet and discuss it? Is that all right?
I'm
Yes.
okay with that.
So I think that's what I heard. Second of all, one other item is the RFQ for the Coos History Museum Plaza. Roger has that ready to go out, and you got-
Yeah, and I would want to clarify that staff did the lion's share of the work. I believe that would be engineering and Jim and Risha put that together. It's an excellent document, so much so that the Coos History Museum Board of Trustees approved it. They're happy with it. but it lays out a process to identify, take in statements of qualifications from professional designers, and then to evaluate that. Part of that evaluation would, though, include not only the Board of Trustees, but since it is the agency that's paying for it, the agency should have representation on that group. I believe it actually calls for 3 representatives, if I'm correct.
From the city?
From the city. So you could, if 2 of the council members want to be on it, if you want to have a staff member on it, we could work that, or if you wanted to have a different mixture, that's great as well, or if you'd like all 3 representatives.
Well, I definitely think 1 staff member needs to be on it. Besides that, I don't know if you want more staff on it, or a couple of councilors want to be on this committee. Okay, Carmen?
I'd be interested.
And
for sure.
Lucinda? Perfect. So we have the 3, and the staff, Roger, that's up to you to decide if you want it yourself. Just to reiterate, we got to this step because of the Alonzo Tucker sighting, and so where we were gonna have it on Front Street, now there's gonna be a spot, still on Front Street, but we're looking at more of a piece of the plaza being also dedicated to that. So just keep that in
It's
mind.
like a memorial garden, correct?
Part of it, yes. Or
So
a
it's more than
memorial.
just one.
But I think it's not, I mean, it could be that for a lot of things, that memorial, so it can encompass that. So I don't think you're structured anything, it's pretty open, so, anyway. So with that, I'm gonna end the night. Roger, anything else from staff?
No.
So I just want to remind everyone, that 18 years ago tomorrow, we had a huge tragedy, probably the worst. It was a Far West fire. We lost 3 firemen, Randy Carpenter, Jeff Common, and Chuck Hanner. So if you get a chance, go by the memorial, say a prayer, and let everyone know. Anyway, that's it. Anyone else?
Could I ask one more question? If we could circle back to Jacobs, if I could just ask one more question.
It's fine.
Have they given any documentation to staff to support why they need more money? Have they showed you what their expenses are? Have they showed you anything at all?
No.
Or are we just taking their word for it that they're spending more than the contract?
And everything, looks like everything's still on there, they're just verbally giving us reasons for the increase, but we have no.
So there's no document that says, okay, here's our spreadsheet. We've got all these expenses that, we expect the city should pay for. I mean, other than just saying we need 30% more, where did that number come from? Okay, that answers my question, thank you.
All right, well, thank you, everyone, and have a happy Thanksgiving as best you can under the circumstances. And anyway, be safe, take care.
Oh, no problem.